She, she's my ex-wife, Mark stammered, his voice a hollow whisper against the flicker of the TV screen. In a dim New York apartment, Mindy Kaling once stood, stung by his cruel words. Black Sow, her eyes blazing with pain-fueled resolve. That insult, a dagger to her soul, sparked a fire. Now her sleek, straight hair gleams under runway lights, her brown skin radiant in a sheer, white-pastel green gown, flowing elegantly as she strides at a star-studded gala. Mark, slouched in defeat, watches her on TV, unreachable, a global icon born from his betrayal. What drove Mindy from humiliation to this dazzling triumph? How did she conquer a cutthroat industry and silence her doubters? Her journey unveils a saga of resilience, beauty, and revenge, one that demands to be heard to its breathtaking end. The air in the cramped New York apartment hung heavy, thick with unspoken resentments that had festered too long. A single lamp cast jagged shadows across the peeling wallpaper, its dim glow barely touching the corners where dust gathered like forgotten promises. Mindy Kaling stood near the kitchen counter, her fingers tracing the edge of a chipped mug, her brown skin catching the faint light. Her long, straight hair fell in a glossy cascade down her back, a silent defiance of the chaos around her. She was 30, beautiful, but tonight her eyes, usually warm, almond-shaped and quick to smile, were narrowed, brimming with a storm she could no longer contain. Mark paced the room, his pale face flushed with anger, his blonde hair disheveled from running his hands through it. His voice, sharp and venomous, sliced through the tense silence. "You think you're something special, Mindy? You're nothing but a black sow dragging me down with you." The words landed like a physical blow, each syllable a blade twisting in her chest. Mindy froze, her breath catching, the mug slipping slightly in her grip. Her heart pounded, a wild drumbeat echoing the pain that surged through her. She wanted to scream, to hurl the mug at the wall, but instead her fingers tightened around the cool porcelain, grounding her. She looked at him, really looked, and saw a stranger in the man she'd once vowed to love. Mark's blue eyes, once soft with promises, were now cold, glinting with a cruelty she hadn't seen before. Or had she? The memory of his snide remarks about her dreams, her sketches of dresses tucked away in a drawer, flickered in her mind. But this was different. This was a wound meant to scar. Mindy's gaze dropped to the necklace at her throat, a delicate silver chain with a tiny star pendant, a gift from her mother when she was 10. "You're a star, Mindy," her mother had said, her voice warm as summer. "Don't let anyone dim your light." The memory flooded her, a lifeline in the suffocating moment. She touched the pendant, its cool metal a tether to a time when she believed in herself. Her mother's words were a whisper against Mark's venom, and they stirred something deep within her, a spark, small but fierce. "Why do you do this?" she whispered, her voice trembling but steady, each word a struggle against the lump in her throat. "Why do you tear me apart?" Her eyes locked onto his, searching for the man she thought she knew, but finding only a shadow. Mark scoffed, turning away, his shoulders rigid with disdain. "Because you deserve it," he spat. "You're not enough, Mindy. Never were." The words stung, but they also ignited something. Beneath the pain, a fire kindled in her chest, a resolve she hadn't felt in years. She thought of her childhood in Brooklyn, sitting cross-legged on her mother's bed, sketching dresses with colored pencils while her mother hummed old jazz tunes. Those sketches were her escape, her dreams woven into every line and curve. Mark had mocked them, calling them childish, but they were hers, a piece of her soul he couldn't touch. She straightened, her spine stiffening as she set the mug down with deliberate care. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of her decision. "You're wrong," she said, her voice low but firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. Mark turned, his brows raised in mock surprise, but she didn't flinch. "You don't get to define me." Her words were a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. She wasn't just speaking to Mark, she was speaking to herself, to the girl who once believed she could be anything. Mindy's heart raced, not with fear now, but with a clarity that burned away the fog of doubt. She saw it all, The years of swallowing his barbs, the nights spent questioning her worth, the dreams she'd buried to keep the peace. No more. The necklace at her throat seemed to pulse with her mother's love, urging her forward. She took a step toward the door, her hair swaying like a curtain of strength, each strand catching the light. "Where do you think you're going?" Mark demanded, his voice rising, a crack of desperation breaking through his anger. He reached for her arm, but she pulled away, her movement swift and sure. "I'm done," she said, her tone final, her eyes blazing with a fire that made him step back. "I'm done letting you break me." The door loomed before her, a threshold to something unknown but vital. Her hand hovered over the knob, her breath steadying as she summoned the courage to cross it. She thought of her mother again, of the sketches hidden in her drawer, of the girl who once dreamed of runways and spotlights. That girl was still inside her, waiting to be freed. Mindy opened the door, the cool night air rushing in, a promise of freedom. She stepped out, leaving Mark behind, his words echoing but powerless now. Her heart ached, but it also sang with a fierce, unshakable resolve. She wasn't the black sow he'd branded her. She was Mindy Kaling, a woman with a fire no one could extinguish. As she walked into the night, the city lights glittering like stars, she felt the weight of her past begin to lift, replaced by a hunger for something greater. The door clicked shut behind her, a final note in the symphony of her departure. She didn't look back. The city's pulse thrummed through the cracked window of Sarah's Brooklyn apartment, a faint hum of traffic and distant sirens weaving into the quiet. Mindy sat on the edge of a worn velvet couch, her fingers twisting the star pendant at her throat, its familiar weight grounding her racing thoughts. The pain of Mark's words still lingered, sharp as a fresh wound, but something else stirred now, a restless energy, a whisper of possibility. Her long, straight hair spilled over her shoulders, catching the soft glow of a nearby lamp, a silent testament to the beauty she'd once believed in. Sarah, her best friend since their college days, leaned against the kitchen counter, her dark eyes fierce with conviction. "You don't need him, Mindy," she said, her voice steady but burning with urgency. "He's been dragging you down for years. You're more than his poison." She slid a mug of chamomile tea across the counter, the steam curling like a question mark between them. Mindy's gaze drifted to the mug, her mind replaying the venom in Mark's voice. "You're not enough," he'd said, and those words had burrowed deep, festering alongside every slight he'd ever thrown her way. Her sketches mocked, her dreams dismissed as childish. She thought of the drawer in their apartment, stuffed with pages of dresses she'd drawn since she was a girl, each one a piece of her heart. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, soft and warm. "Draw what makes you soar, Mindy. That's your power." They'd sit together in their tiny Brooklyn kitchen, jazz playing low, colored pencils scattered across the table. Those moments were her sanctuary, a place Mark could never touch. "I thought I could fix him," Mindy admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, raw with the weight of her confession. "I thought if I loved him enough—" She trailed off, her throat tightening. The truth was a bitter pill. She'd lost herself trying to save a man who didn't want saving. Her fingers tightened around the pendant, the star digging into her palm. She could almost hear her mother's laughter, see her proud smile. That memory was a lifeline, pulling her from the abyss. Sarah crossed the room, sitting beside her, her presence a steady anchor. "You can't fix someone who thrives on breaking you," she said, her tone gentle but unyielding. "But you can rebuild yourself. You're Mindy Kaling, damn it. You're a force." She reached for her phone, scrolling with purpose, then turned the screen toward Mindy. An Instagram ad glowed, a casting call for new models, bold and beckoning. "This," Sarah said, tapping the screen, "this is your way out." Mindy stared at the ad, her heart stuttering. The image showed a woman striding down a runway, fierce and untouchable, her dress flowing like liquid starlight. Something stirred in Mindy's chest, a flicker of the girl who'd once dreamed of such moments. But doubt crept in, cold and familiar. "Me?" she said, her voice small. "I'm nobody in that world, Sarah. They'd eat me alive." Sarah's eyes flashed, fierce as a lioness. "Nobody? You're the girl who'd sketch gowns until midnight, who'd make her mom cry with how beautiful her designs were. "You're not nobody, you're Mindy." She grabbed Mindy's hand, squeezing it. "Mark made you forget that. Don't let him win." The words hit like a spark to dry tinder. Mindy's mind raced, memories flooding back. Her mother's hands guiding hers over paper, teaching her to shade the curve of a bodice, to dream without limits. She'd stopped sketching after marrying Mark, tucking her dreams away to keep the peace. But now in Sarah's cluttered apartment, with the city humming outside, those dreams clawed their way back to the surface. She could feel them, alive and insistent, demanding to be heard. She stood, pacing to the window, her hair swaying like a curtain of resolve. The city stretched before her, a mosaic of lights and possibilities. Her fingers found the notebook in her bag, its pages worn from years of use. She flipped it open, revealing a sketch of a dress. Flowing, elegant, with a neckline that echoed her mother's grace. Her heart ached with longing, not just for the past but for the future she could still claim. "I used to think I could be something," she said, her voice stronger now, a thread of steel woven through it. "When I was a kid, I'd draw dresses and imagine them on runways. I'd imagine me on runways." She turned to Sarah, her eyes alight with a fire she hadn't felt in years. "What if I could still do that?" Sarah grinned, a spark of triumph in her eyes. "That's my girl. You're not just going to do it. You're going to own it." She pointed to the phone again, the ad still glowing. "Start here. One step. You don't need Mark's permission or anyone's. Just yours." Mindy's breath caught, her chest tight with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She thought of her mother, of the star pendant, of the girl who'd once believed she could conquer the world. That girl was still there, buried but not broken. She picked up the notebook, her fingers tracing the lines of her sketch, each stroke a promise to herself. Mark's words echoed, but they were distant now, drowned out by the roar of her own heart. "I'm going to try," she said, her voice steady, a vow to herself. "For me, for Mom." She clutched the pendant, its star gleaming faintly in the lamplight. The city outside seemed to hum in agreement, its lights a beacon for the path ahead. She didn't know what lay beyond, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to find out. Mindy's heart pounded as she stepped into the Manhattan studio, the air buzzing with the sharp clatter of heels and the low hum of ambition. Her long, straight hair swayed with each cautious step, a glossy shield against the chaos. The space was a whirlwind of activity, models gliding past with practiced poise, assistants barking orders, cameras flashing like impatient stars. Mindy's brown skin felt exposed under the harsh lights, her beauty raw and unpolished compared to the sleek figures around her. She clutched her mother's star pendant, its familiar weight anchoring her nerves. This was her first step into a world she'd only dreamed of, and every fiber of her being screamed she didn't belong. She adjusted her simple black dress, chosen for its understated elegance, and scanned the room. Her eyes caught on Chloe, a statuesque model with sharp cheekbones and a colder gaze, who leaned against a wall, sizing her up. Chloe's lips curled into a smirk. "A rookie, huh?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Think you can waltz in and steal the spotlight? This isn't a game for wannabes." The words stung, echoing Mark's venom, but Mindy's jaw tightened. She wouldn't crumble. Not here, not now. Her mind flickered to her childhood, to nights spent sketching dresses by flashlight when her mother worked late. Those sketches were her rebellion against doubt, each line a defiance of the world's limits. She could still feel the thrill of creating, the way a pencil in her hand made her invincible. Chloe's taunt was just another hurdle, not a wall. Mindy straightened, her hair catching the light like liquid obsidian, and met Chloe's gaze. "I'm not here to play," she said, her voice low but steady, a spark of fire in her eyes. Chloe's smirk faltered, just for a moment, before she turned away with a dismissive laugh. The casting director, a wiry man named Julian, with a clipboard and a keen eye, called her name. Mindy's stomach lurched, but she stepped forward, her heels clicking with purpose. The studio's energy pressed against her, a tide threatening to pull her under. But she thought of her mother's voice. "You're a star, Mindy." She could almost smell the jasmine perfume her mother wore. feel the warmth of her encouragement. That memory was her armor, and she wore it fiercely. Julian gestured to a mark on the floor, his expression unreadable. "Let's see what you've got," he said, his tone clipped but curious. Mindy stepped into the spotlight, the camera's lens a cold, unblinking eye. Her breath hitched, doubt whispering that she was out of her depth. She wasn't polished like Chloe, didn't have the effortless grace of the others. But then she thought of her sketches, of the dresses she'd poured her soul into, each one a vision of who she could be. She wasn't just here to model, she was here to become. "Pose," Julian commanded. Mindy hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. She closed her eyes for a split second, picturing one of her sketches, a flowing gown with a neckline that framed the collarbone like a work of art. She channeled that image, letting it guide her. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted, and she struck a pose, her body curving with a quiet confidence she hadn't known she possessed. The camera clicked, and Julian's eyes narrowed, intrigued. "Again," he said, a hint of interest breaking through his stoic facade. "Give me more." Mindy moved each pose a step deeper into herself. Her hair swayed, catching the light, her brown skin glowing with a warmth that felt like defiance. She wasn't just posing, she was telling a story, one of a woman refusing to be diminished. The room seemed to fade, the chatter and stares dissolving until it was just her and the lens. For the first time, she felt seen, not as Mark's shadow or Chloe's target, but as Mindy Kaling, a force unfolding. "Interesting," Julian murmured, scribbling on his clipboard. "You've got something raw, unique." His words were a lifeline, pulling her from the sea of self-doubt. But Chloe's voice cut through, sharp and deliberate, as she passed by. "Don't get too comfortable, rookie. One shoot doesn't make you a star." The jab landed, but Mindy's resolve held firm. She thought of her mother, of the nights they'd dreamed together over sketches. Chloe's words were noise, not truth. As the session ended, Julian approached, his expression softer. "You've got potential, Mindy," he said, "but this world is brutal. Can you handle it?" His question hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation. Mindy's fingers brushed her pendant, her mother's faith pulsing through her. "I can," she said, her voice steady, a vow to herself. She glanced at Chloe, who was watching from across the room, her eyes narrowed. Mindy didn't flinch. This was her path now, and she'd walk it, no matter the cost. She left the studio, the city's pulse matching her own. Her heart was a mix of fear and exhilaration, but the fire in her chest burned brighter than ever. She wasn't just chasing a dream, she was claiming it, one defiant step at a time. The city's neon glow seeped through the window of Mindy's tiny rented room, casting jagged patterns across the floor where her sketchbook lay open. Her long, straight hair, still sleek from the day's trials, framed her face as she hunched over a new dress design, her pencil moving with a fury born of defiance. The studio's harsh lights and Chloe's cutting words lingered in her mind, but so did Julian's faint praise. "You've got potential." It was an ember she clutched tightly, refusing to let it die. Mindy's brown skin glowed softly in the lamplight, her star pendant glinting as she worked, a silent reminder of her mother's belief in her. Every stroke of her pencil was a rebellion against the doubts that clawed at her heart. The past weeks had been a gauntlet. Audition after audition, Mindy faced cold rejections, each one an echo of Mark's cruelty. "You look too niche," one casting director had said, barely glancing at her. "Not the right fit for our brand," another dismissed, her tone clipped. The worst came veiled in politeness. "Your skin tone, it's just not what we're going for." The words stung, slicing at the confidence she'd fought to build. Yet beneath the pain, a fire burned. She thought of her childhood, sketching dresses under her mother's watchful eye, jazz filling their Brooklyn apartment. Those memories were her shield, and she wielded them fiercely. Chloe's presence made it worse. At every major casting, there she was, her sharp features and sharper tongue cutting through the crowd. "Still chasing dreams, rookie?" She'd sneered at a recent audition, her voice loud enough for others to hear. "You're out of your league." Mindy had felt the eyes of other models on her, their whispers like needles. Worse, she'd overheard Chloe talking to an assistant, spreading a rumor. She's just a diversity hire, no real talent. The lie spread like wildfire, tainting Mindy's name before she could prove herself. Her chest tightened with anger, but she swallowed it, channeling it into her sketches. She drew a gown with bold lines, its silhouette fierce, like the woman she was becoming. Late nights Mindy practiced in front of a cracked mirror, perfecting her walk, her poses. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, her hair swaying with each step, a rhythm that felt like reclaiming herself. She studied runway videos, mimicking the poise of supermodels, but adding her own flair, a subtle tilt of the head, a spark in her eyes. She wasn't Chloe, all polished perfection. She was Mindy, raw and real, her brown skin a canvas of resilience. But the rejections piled up, each one threatening to douse her fire. She'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mother's pendant heavy against her chest. "You're a star," her mother's voice echoed, and she'd cling to it, refusing to break. One evening, exhausted from another failed audition, Mindy sat at a diner, sketching on a napkin. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, paused by her table. "That's beautiful," she said, nodding at the napkin's flowing gown. "You got a gift, honey." Mindy smiled, her heart lifting. "Thanks," she whispered, the words warming her. She thought of her mother, who'd always seen her talent, even when Mindy doubted herself. The napkin sketch became her anchor, a reminder of why she was fighting. Her chance came unexpectedly. A small local brand, looking for fresh faces, held an open call. Mindy arrived, her hair gleaming, her presence commanding, despite the nerves twisting her stomach. Chloe was there, her smirk ever present, but Mindy ignored her, focusing on the moment. She walked for the panel, her steps deliberate, her brown skin radiant under the lights. She imagined her mother watching, proud. The creative director, a woman with a sharp bob and sharper eyes, leaned forward. "You've got something," she said, her tone appraising. "It's not polished, but it's real." Mindy's heart soared, but Chloe's voice cut in as they left. "One gig won't save you, rookie." Days later, the call came. She'd booked the ad. It was small, a local campaign for a boutique line, but it was hers. The shoot was chaotic, with a tight budget and a frazzled crew. But Mindy thrived. She moved with purpose, her hair catching the light, her poses echoing the sketches she'd drawn for years. The photographer, impressed, murmured, "Keep that energy, Mindy." For the first time, she felt like she belonged. Back in her room, she taped the napkin sketch to the wall, next to her mother's pendant, which she hung on a hook. The campaign wouldn't make her a star, but it was a start, a crack in the wall of doubt. Chloe's rumors still stung, and the industry's barriers loomed large, but Mindy's fire burned brighter. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the girl who'd sketched dreams under her mother's gaze, for the woman she was becoming. Each rejection, each jab, only fueled her. She was Mindy Kaling, and she was just beginning. The Los Angeles sun beat down mercilessly on the casting venue, its golden rays filtering through towering glass windows, turning the room into a furnace of ambition and sweat. Mindy stepped inside, her long, straight hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that swung like a pendulum of determination with each stride. Her brown skin shimmered under a light sheen of perspiration, but her eyes, those fierce, almond-shaped windows to her soul, burned with unyielding focus. The star pendant at her throat caught the light, a talisman pulsing with her mother's enduring faith. This wasn't just another audition, it was her reckoning, a chance to shatter the glass ceiling Chloe and the industry had built around her. The room buzzed with tension, models milling about like sharks in shallow water. Chloe was there, of course, perched on a velvet chaise, her legs crossed in regal disdain, flipping through a magazine as if the world owed her its pages. She glanced up, her lips twisting into that familiar smirk. "Back for more punishment, rookie?" she drawled, loud enough for heads to turn. "This one's for the big leagues. Versace scouts in the house. You'll crash and burn." The words were poison, but Mindy felt them slide off her like rain on silk. She'd heard worse from Mark, endured Chloe's rumors that had cost her gigs. No more. Her sketches, her mother's voice, they armored her heart. Mindy approached the sign-in desk, her simple white blouse and jeans a stark contrast to the parade of couture around her. The creative director, Elena, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like polished obsidian, scanned the room. "Next," she called, her voice cutting through the din. Mindy's name echoed from the speakers, and her pulse thundered in her ears. She stepped forward, the runway mark glowing underfoot like a challenge. Cameras waited, judges poised. Elena, flanked by Versace reps, whose gazes were cold appraisals. "Walk," Elena commanded. Mindy inhaled deeply, channeling the napkin sketch from the diner, the one that had sparked her first win. Her heels struck the floor with precision, each step a declaration. She moved with a fluidity born of endless mirror practice, her hair releasing from its ponytail mid-stride, cascading down her back in glossy waves that caught every light. Her poses were poetry, shoulders back, chin high, brown skin radiant, eyes locking with the lens as if daring it to look away. The room hushed. Even Chloe's magazine drooped forgotten in her lap. But Mindy wasn't done. As the walk ended, she reached into her bag, pulling out a folded sketch, a gown she'd drawn last night, inspired by her mother's jazz-filled lessons. Bold lines, sheer fabric draping like mist. A nod to the pastel dreams she'd buried. She handed it to Elena. "This is me," she said, her voice steady, laced with quiet fire. "Not just a face, a vision." Elena's brows arched, unfolding the paper. The room leaned in, whispers rippled. Chloe stood, her face paling. "What is this amateur hour?" she snapped, but her voice cracked. Elena studied the sketch, her fingers tracing the curves. This is fresh," she murmured, eyes flicking to Mindy. "Raw talent. You're in." The words hung, then exploded into reality. The Versace reps nodded approval. Cameras flashed. Mindy's heart soared, tears pricking her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was her breakthrough. The campaign, a major digital push, hers to claim. The shoot blurred into a whirlwind. Mindy arrived at dawn, the set alive with lights and chaos. She slipped into the first look, a sleek black number that hugged her curves, and owned it. Her hair flowed free, her skin glowed under professional makeup, every pose infused with the sketch's soul. "Yes, give me that fire," the photographer barked, his lens devouring her. Social media ignited mid-shoot. Clips leaked, hashtags trending, her new face Mindy. By evening, her face dominated feeds, the campaign teaser viral, racking millions of views. Back in her hotel room, phone buzzing incessantly, Mindy collapsed onto the bed, sketchbook in hand. Sarah's FaceTime call lit the screen. "Mindy, you're everywhere. The comments are exploding. Who is she?" "Iconic." Sarah's voice was a squeal of joy. Mindy laughed, a sound pure and triumphant, her fingers tracing the star pendant. "Mom would have loved this," she whispered, voice thick. She always knew. But triumph carried shadows. Chloe's glare at the shoot's wrap lingered, a promise of more battles. Yet Mindy felt unbreakable. The Times Square billboard flashed in her mind, her image towering, hair whipping in digital wind, brown skin defiant against the night sky. It was real now, her face beaming down on the world. She wasn't the rookie anymore. She was rising, a phoenix from Mark's ashes, Chloe's spite. As notifications poured in, agencies calling, fans messaging, Mindy stood at the window, LA's skyline sprawling before her. Her reflection stared back, fierce, beautiful, alive. The fire in her chest blazed, no longer a spark but an inferno. She'd broken through, and the world was just beginning to see her light. The roar of the crowd beyond the Paris runway pulsed like a living heartbeat, vibrating through the velvet curtains where Mindy Kaling stood, poised in the shadows. Her long, straight hair cascaded in glossy waves, catching the faint glow of backstage lights. Each strand a testament to her unyielding spirit. Her brown skin shimmered under a touch of highlighter, amplifying the radiance she'd fought to reclaim. The star pendant at her throat gleamed, a quiet anchor to her mother's unwavering belief, its weight steadying her as she prepared to step into the world's gaze. The Versace campaign had catapulted her, her face now graced billboards, Instagram reels, and whispered conversations in fashion capitals. But this moment, walking for a top designer in Paris, was her coronation. She adjusted the gown, a daring creation of crimson silk that clung to her curves before flaring into a dramatic train. Her heart thrummed with a mix of exhilaration and nerves, but the fire in her chest burned brighter than fear. She thought of her mother, humming jazz as they sketched together, her voice a melody of courage. Draw what makes you soar, Mindy. That memory fueled her now, each step a tribute to the girl who dreamed beyond Brooklyn's limits. The music shifted, a sultry beat signaling her cue. Mindy stepped onto the runway and the world fell away. Spotlights bathed her in brilliance, her brown skin glowing like polished amber, her hair swaying in rhythm with her stride. The crowd gasped, then roared, their applause a tidal wave. She moved with a grace honed by late nights and relentless will, her poses sharp yet fluid, each one a story of defiance. Cameras flashed, capturing every angle, her almond eyes fierce, her lips curved in a quiet, knowing smile. She wasn't just walking, she was commanding, a queen claiming her throne. Backstage chaos reigned, but Mindy's focus was unbreakable. Chloe lingered nearby, her once sharp gaze softened, almost reverent. The rivalry hadn't vanished, but something had shifted. "You're good," Chloe said, her voice low, stripped of its usual venom. "I didn't see it before." Mindy met her eyes, her expression unyielding, but not unkind. "I always knew," she replied, her tone steady, a nod to the sketches and dreams that had carried her here. Chloe nodded, a flicker of respect passing between them, a truce forged in the crucible of Mindy's rise. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Milan's runways embraced her, each show a triumph. Dior, Prada, names that once seemed unreachable now clamored for her. Vogue called, and her cover shoot was a love letter to her journey. Mindy in a flowing gown, hair cascading, brown skin radiant against a sunset backdrop, the star pendant catching the lens. Social media erupted, fans dubbing her the Brooklyn Phoenix, a name that felt like destiny. Every click, every share, was a brick in the empire she was building, one she'd forged from pain and perseverance. Yet amid the frenzy, Mindy sought quiet moments. Late one night, in a Milan hotel, she sat cross-legged on the floor, sketchbook open. Her pencil danced, crafting a dress inspired by her mother's elegance. Soft curves, bold lines, a piece that felt like home. The star pendant rested against her chest, a silent partner in her art. She thought of her mother's laughter, her pride, and tears pricked her eyes, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. "You'd love this, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The sketch was more than lines. It was a promise kept, a dream reborn. The industry wasn't all glamour. Whispers of envy trailed her. Some called her rise a fluke, others a token gesture. But Mindy's fire was unquenchable. At a Milan after-party, a designer approached, her sketch from the Versace audition in hand. "This vision," he said, eyes alight. "We want it for our next collection." Mindy's heart leapt, her childhood dreams colliding with reality. She nodded, her smile radiant. "It's just the beginning," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her journey. As the season closed, Mindy stood backstage at her final show, the pendant warm against her skin. She glanced at her reflection, hair flowing, eyes fierce, brown skin a canvas of strength. The girl who'd once doubted her worth was gone, replaced by a woman who'd conquered runways and hearts. The crowd's cheers echoed beyond the curtain, calling her name. She was no longer just Mindy Kaling. She was a global star, her light too bright to dim. The electric hum of anticipation crackled backstage at the Milan Fashion Week finale, where Mindy Kaling stood, her long, straight hair catching the frenetic glow of vanity lights. Her brown skin shimmered under a delicate layer of makeup, accentuating the fierce resolve in her almond eyes. The star pendant at her throat pulsed with her heartbeat, a quiet reminder of her mother's faith as she prepared for another show. The world now knew her name. Runways, magazines, and millions of followers had crowned her the Brooklyn Phoenix. Yet as she adjusted the sleek, emerald gown hugging her curves, a shadow from her past crept in, unbidden but undeniable. Across the ocean, in a dim New York apartment, Mark slumped on a sagging couch, the TV casting a cold glow across his unshaven face. The screen blazed with Mindy's image. Striding down a Paris runway, her hair a glossy cascade, her brown skin radiant under blazing lights. His fingers tightened around a half-empty beer bottle, his knuckles white. "She's my ex-wife," he muttered, the words bitter, laced with a regret he could barely admit. The camera lingered on Mindy's face, her eyes fierce, untouchable, a far cry from the woman he'd belittled. His phone lay beside him, its screen dark until he typed hesitantly, "Mindy, I was a fool. You're a star. Please, talk to me." He hit send, his heart pounding with a desperate hope. Mindy's phone buzzed in her dressing room, but she barely glanced at it. The message from Mark flashed, his words a clumsy plea, dripping with remorse. Her chest tightened, not with pain, but with a strange, distant pity. She saw his name, his attempt to claw back into her life, and felt nothing but the weight of her own freedom. Her finger hovered, then deleted the message with a single tap. The pendant at her throat seemed to warm, her mother's voice echoing, "You're a star, Mindy." She wasn't his anymore. She was hers. The show ended, and Mindy slipped away to a quieter corner of Milan, where she was hosting a charity event for young artists. The venue, a candlelit gallery, buzzed with eager faces, many inspired by her rise. She moved through the crowd, her presence magnetic, her smile warm but guarded. Sarah, who'd flown in to celebrate, pulled her aside, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Mark's been texting you, hasn't he?" she asked, her voice sharp with disdain. Mindy nodded, her lips curving faintly. "He's begging now," she said, her tone steady, almost amused. "Says he was wrong, that I'm a star, but he's nothing to me anymore." Sarah grinned, fierce and triumphant. "Good! Let him choke on his regret." Mindy's laughter was soft but genuine, a sound that carried her liberation. She thought of her mother, of the sketches they'd drawn together, of the dreams Mark had tried to crush. Those dreams were now her reality, painted across runways and magazine covers. Mark's words, "Black Sow," echoed faintly, but they were powerless, drowned out by the roar of her own heart. Back in New York, Mark stared at the TV, now showing a live feed of Mindy's charity event. She stood at a podium, her hair flowing, her brown skin glowing under soft lights, speaking to a rapt crowd about resilience and art. "No one can dim your light unless you let them," she said, her voice clear, resonant. Mark's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with a mix of shame and longing. The camera panned to her hand, brushing the star pendant, and he recognized it, the necklace she'd worn even in their darkest fights. His message sat unanswered, a digital ghost in the void of her indifference. Mindy stepped off the podium, her heart full but steady. The young artists swarmed her, their sketches in hand, eyes wide with admiration. One girl, clutching a drawing of a dress, reminded Mindy of herself at 10, sketching under her mother's gaze. "Keep creating," Mindy told her, her voice thick with emotion. "Your art is your power." The girl beamed, and Mindy felt her mother's presence, a warmth that wrapped around her like a hug. As the event wound down, Mindy stood by a window, Milan's lights sprawling before her. Sarah joined her, handing her a glass of wine. "He's watching you, you know," Sarah said, nodding toward an imaginary TV. "Probably losing his mind." Mindy's smile was serene, unshakable. "Let him watch," she said, her voice a quiet blade. "He can't touch this life." The pendant gleamed, her mother's love a constant, and Mindy knew she'd already won, not just against Mark, but against every doubt that had ever tried to hold her back. The grand hall of the New York Gala pulsed with crystalline light, chandeliers dripping like frozen stars over a sea of cooter and whispered awe. Mindy Kaling glided through the crowd, her long, straight hair a silken river flowing down her back, her brown skin luminous against the soft glow of ambient lamps. The star pendant nestled at her throat, warm from her pulse, carried her mother's spirit into this pinnacle moment. Milan's echoes, Mark's futile plea, the charity's inspiration, faded into fuel for her final ascent. Tonight at the Fashion Legacy Awards, she wasn't just a star, she was a beacon, ready to ignite others. Admirers parted like waves, their eyes tracing her path with reverence. Young models clustered near the stage, sketches clutched in trembling hands, mirroring her own childhood dreams. Mindy paused, her smile genuine, her heart swelling with a profound tenderness. One girl, no older than 15, thrust forward a drawing, a gown with ethereal layers, bold yet vulnerable. "You made me believe I could," the girl whispered, voice quivering. Mindy knelt, her hair brushing the girl's shoulder, and touched the paper. "You already can," she murmured, her almond eyes locking with wide ones. "Your light is yours alone. Never let it flicker." The girl's face bloomed with hope, and Mindy rose, the exchange a quiet vow to pass her fire onward. Sarah sidled up, her grin electric. "They're all here for you," she said, nodding to the throng. Mindy's chest tightened with gratitude, not arrogance. This was her legacy, proof that pain could birth power. The MC's voice boomed, "Mindy Kaling!" Applause thundered as she ascended the podium, the spotlight embracing her like an old friend. Her gown for the speech, a simple yet striking sheath, hugged her form, but it was her presence that commanded silence. "Ladies, dreamers, warriors," Mindy began, her voice resonant, weaving through the hall like silk. "I stand here not as a victim of cruelty, but as its conqueror. Once, words like weapons stripped me bare, called me less than I am. But I learned, self-love isn't a shield, it's a sword." Pauses punctuated her words, each one landing with the weight of her journey. In this industry of mirrors and masks, embrace your skin, your curves, your fire. Diversity isn't a trend, it's the truth of beauty. Only you define yourself. Shine unapologetically. The crowd erupted, tears glistening on cheeks, young models nodding fiercely. Mindy's eyes misted, her mother's pendant a steady thrum against her heart. She'd spoken for the girl in Brooklyn, for every soul dimmed by doubt. Across the city in his shadowed apartment, Mark hunched before the TV, the gala broadcast filling the void. Mindy's face filled the screen, radiant, unbreakable, her words piercing him like shards. "Only you define yourself," she declared, and he flinched, the beer bottle slipping from numb fingers. His pale face crumpled, eyes hollow with the regret that had festered since her rise. He'd scrolled her feeds obsessively, each post a knife twist. Paris struts, Vogue covers, her unassailable glow. Now, this, her triumph, broadcast live, mocking his isolation. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering over her name, but stopped. She was gone, a star he'd tried to extinguish, now blazing beyond reach. Backstage, stylists swarmed Mindy, transforming her for the finale. The gown emerged, a masterpiece of white laced with pastel green, sheer elegance whispering over her brown skin. Fabric clung like a lover to her curves, the bodice a delicate lattice, revealing hints of strength beneath. Long sleeves trailed gossamer threads, the train pooling lightly to the floor in a soft sweep, evoking Hollywood's golden sirens. It was her sketch reborn, a fusion of mother's lessons and her own vision. She stepped into it, the mirror reflecting a goddess, hair cascading freely, skin aglow, eyes alight with destiny. The runway awaited, a gleaming path under strobing lights. Music swelled, a soaring anthem of strings and beats, as Mindy emerged. The crowd gasped, then roared, phones aloft capturing her stride. She moved like liquid fire, each step deliberate, hips swaying with own sensuality, hair rippling in waves. Her brown skin contrasted divinely with the gown's ethereal hues, the sheer panels catching light in prismatic bursts. She paused at the end, one hand on hip, gaze sweeping the audience, fierce, inviting, triumphant. Turn, stride back, the train whispering secrets, intercut flashes, Mark on his couch, head bowed, tears carving paths down his cheeks as her image towered, untouchable. Young models watched from wings, eyes wide with worship. Chloe stood among them, her nod subtle but sincere. A final bridge crossed. Mindy reached the stage's end, pivoting with grace, the gown's train fanning like wings. Voiceover echoed in her mind, soft yet thunderous. "I am enough." The words weren't spoken aloud, but the hall felt them, a collective exhale of empowerment. As confetti rained and cheers peaked, Mindy stood center stage, arms open, basking. Sarah rushed her, hugging her tight. "You did it," she whispered. Mindy's laugh was pure joy, her heart full. Mark's shadow vanished. Chloe's rivalry forged into alliance. Her mother's pendant gleamed, a star among stars. She was Mindy Kaling, supermodel, visionary, unbreakable. The world had tried to define her. She'd redefined it. And in that moment, her legacy ignited, eternal and fierce. Mindy Kaling's journey, from a wound carved by cruel words to a radiant triumph on global runways, burns as a testament to unyielding resilience. Her brown skin, flowing hair, and star pendant carried her mother's faith, transforming pain into power. As she dazzled in her pastel gown, Mark's regret faded into irrelevance, a shadow to her light. What did Mindy's rise stir in you? How does her defiance inspire your own battles? Share your thoughts. Her story thrives in your voice. Thank you for walking this path with us, for feeling every heartbeat of her ascent. Mindy's fire now lights yours. Until we meet again, keep shining unapologetically.